All right, I am going to call to order this town council meeting on March 16th, 2021 to go over the last three areas of the budget. So, sorry. If you want to go ahead, do you want to put your presentation up again, Mike?
Sure. Well, I was going to start. Hi, everybody. Mike Rosen, Town Manager. Tonight's agenda, this is the third night of a three-night series that we do every year where we kind of dive into each of the department budgets, overview, talk about what's changed since last year, what new things there might be, things like that. Tonight, we're working on the planning and community development departments. There are several, as well as several boards and commissions that interact with the planning and land use departments. We also have Board of Education budget and solid waste. We actually might switch C and B just because the presentation has solid waste before Board of Ed budget. It should be quick anyway. And then we do have public comment on department presentations are on this agenda. So that's more if the public has something that they would like to share on the department presentations. It's more not so much a back and forth or like a question and answer, but it's just if you have comments, we'll take notes. Really the public hearing is tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. That was the intent. The public hearing is tomorrow night. So if there's any questions or anything that we can take notes on tonight, we will do that under public comment. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then go to the presentation. Give me 1 second, please, while I open it. Okay. Can't open it.
1, 2, 3.
Presentation.
4.
Okay, let me just make sure this is the right version. Perfect. Okay. All right, I'm going to share my screen again, everybody. Sorry for the delay. Here we go. So this is tonight's presentation. Let me just full screen that. Okay, perfect. I will just note too that due to a schedule conflict that the interim planner, Mr. D'Amato, has, we're going to stop after the land use departments and do questions about planning and development before we go on to solid waste and the Board of Ed, just so that we have Mr. D'Amato in the room for that. Okay, so let's go first things first. Let me minimize my thing here. And so planning and zoning services, that encompasses a lot of things in town. Public health is part of that. Planning and Zoning Commission, plus the Design Advisory Board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Wetlands and Watercourses Commission, Conservation Commission, Agriculture Commission, Building and Inspection Services, and our consulting town engineer are all part of land use or planning and zoning services here in Tolland. As it's the asterisk there says engineering service appears under the public works budget, as we talked about at our last meeting, but generally is managed by the planning and development department. So that's why it shows up in DPW, but we'll talk about it tonight. So this is just another sort of way to look at what I just said. It's more of a breakdown, but town services, public health, planning and development, engineering, and then all the commissions that are supported by the staff that works in the land use departments. So in the planning and development department specifically, there's the one major change, and we'll see the usual spreadsheet that people are used to seeing in a moment. There's an increase to the director salary. So that, as many or most of you know, that we did hire a new director of planning and development not too long ago. We had a long-standing staff member moved on back in, I want to say September, somewhere around that time frame. And we did advertise the position a little bit. The salary was a point of that, and we did hire a new person at a little bit higher than the previous director was making. So we increased the budget by the $10,000 to the director's salary. And then in terms of land use commissions, there was a $550 advertising cost, which I'll show you in a moment where that hits. And then they also wanted to show the revenue generation side. So PZC generates almost $3,000 a year in application fees. ZBA, about $1,400 in application fees. Wetlands, about $1,000 a year in application fees. Zoning permits are $775. So altogether that adds up to just over $6,000 in revenues generated for the various permits. And here's where all of that, the normal sheet that we show. So the only major change in any of the lines is the overall $10,000 payroll increase that I mentioned for the director position. And then everything else remains flat down the line here, zeros all around. And then this is the PZC commission, their budget. This is for the commission budget, which is about 24, or sorry, it's altogether it's about $13,000. But here's the various line items. We didn't make any edits to any of these boards this year. It's completely zero. Here in the Zoning Board of Appeals, the only change, this is the 550 I mentioned earlier. The advertising got bumped up just a bit. Dollars wise and percentage wise, it looks large, but dollars wise, it's $550 more than last year. Inland Wetlands Commission, there was a $10 increase, it looks like, to dues and memberships, going from $1,290 to $1,300. And so we built that into the budget this year. No change to Agriculture Commission's budget. Printing, program materials, property maintenance all stay the same as last year. Conservation Commission, that's true for them as well. No change. And Public Health, our chairperson Nuccio is also a co-member of the Board of Health. The Public Health, we oversee, the Board of Directors oversees the Eastern Highlands Health District, so town manager serves on that as well. And we were alerted during their budget process, which happened a few months ago, that they were going to increase 3.34% due to membership. Our town membership contribution rate increased this year. So that's something that we didn't, we don't have any wiggle room on, although we did talk to them about, it seems like a large number, but it's only $2,786. So that's where the professional services line shows here in the public health services line item, goes up from 83.3 to 86.1. And building inspection, Jim Packwin is here with us tonight. He's our building inspector, and overall budget increased by 25.28. It's purely payroll driven, and that covers the raises for the non-union staff as well as the raises for the union staff. It's both are built into that 25.28 number. The program budget itself remains the same. Here's the roll up for that. So building official. Here's the, like I mentioned, the payroll line is the only line that there's any delta to here. Engineering, we talked a little bit about this under the Public Works night, but there's actually an overall decrease to engineering this year to the entire budget. It's very slight, but there's a $350 decrease in office supplies, and we did go up $60 in service contract, so it nets out to $290. So there's that. The 75 stays the same for engineering services for the firm that Chuck Eaton belongs to. He's our town engineer. Service contracts are up, office supplies are down. So at this point, I'd like to pause and stop sharing my screen, because as I talked about, we'd like, while Mr. D'Amato's in the room, our interim planner. Hi, Mike, thank you for being here. If there's any questions on any of the budgets I just went over, now would be a good time for the town council to ask those questions while Mike, we have him for about 21 minutes. So we got to make every moment count.
21 minutes. Wow. All right. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask specifically about the planning and community development area? Brenda.
Thank you. Brenda Flusy. I don't have any questions. I actually just have a comment. Just want to say, please pass on our thanks to the entire department. I know this past year has not been what we had all hoped it would be, and to have lost Heidi during the year, I know put a huge strain on the department. But everything that I've heard from the residents and anybody that's interacted with anybody in your department was that everybody handled themselves very well, with grace. They were very helpful, very accommodating, and it was very much appreciated, everything they did to try to accommodate the needs of the residents during this pandemic, especially since, last spring, a lot of people started doing build outs and adding sheds and outdoor spaces and stuff. So I know you guys were swamped, and it's really, really appreciated. And the dedication from your workers, especially Andrea, has been exemplary. So please pass that on. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anybody else? No? Oh, no, Steve.
I just had one. I had submitted a few in advance, but I think some of them might be directed towards other staff. But if Mr. D'Amato is able to answer it, what do you feel are kind of the most pressing challenges and opportunities for the new incoming director that they'll be facing upon their arrival?
Yeah. So I did have your email forwarded to me, so I tried to jot down kind of my thoughts based on my assessment. I've only been in Tolland a couple of weeks, so I haven't had a ton of time, but just from what I've seen and kind of my observations, the challenges that the department will face are the same challenges that the Planning and Zoning Commission faces, in that oftentimes what the market wants and what the regulations want are two different things. And working that out and figuring out who wins that tug of war, if you will, is going to continue to be a challenge. I do a lot of work in Eastern Connecticut, and what you sometimes have to think about is the alternative and what you're facing and what the alternative is, and if the alternative is a month down the road or 100 years down the road. And having that sort of conversation and having a commission that's responsive to that will be important. From an opportunities perspective, COVID, like it or not, forced a lot of people to have to get over some things they weren't comfortable with, and they had to think outside the box, and we had to make some changes. Online meetings, while a lot of people don't like them, have really brought transparency to the land use process, because we have to post everything online. So, the days of sitting in a meeting and following along verbally with your ears as the commission does the work at the table is gone. That part's over. So people are allowed to be as engaged as they want to be. And I think that will dovetail nicely with a new director being able to look at these things and say, how do we come up with a workflow that is efficient, that provides the residents and business owners and applicants with the same level of service and information that they've become used to through COVID, without just adding to the to-do list of now we need to do everything twice because we're doing public meetings in person and online. So I think there's an opportunity there, and having someone new that's not from Tolland, that's got a fresh set of eyes, will really, I think, allow those conversations to happen from sort of an out-of-the-box perspective, which is, I think, important. In reading through some of the other stuff you had mentioned, talking about preparation of current staff to prepare for the new director, certainly I am going to do everything in my power to make that transition smooth. I've done these staff handoffs a number of times before, and I kind of know what's needed to get him, really running from day one. It's important to me personally in the work that I'm doing for the town, but also in my discussions with a lot of the business owners, that there is consistency in the way that these procedures are interpreted and how they kind of hit the ground. So we want to make sure that's consistent, which we will do. And then your last point, as far as looking back in the last year, and looking at what we've had to do, and sort of things that we'd love to fix, and things we might be proud about. I think that there's been a lot of challenges with running all these applications online and having to manage virtual meeting packets and 4 and 5 revisions to the same application in between when the commission looks at it and then when they look at it a second time. So there are a lot of moving parts, and having to manage the statutory deadlines, requirements, and FOI procedures that are really govern the land use realm, in some cases much in a much greater way than a lot of other commissions in town, right? With legal notices, public hearings, agendas in paper, abutters notifications, signs, referrals to CROG, adjacent municipalities. We've got a lot of moving parts. And if you miss one of those, it's a big deal. At least in my book, it's a big deal. So it's been challenging to sort of manage that fire drill, but they've gotten better at it and really have gotten to a point where we've kind of greased the skids and we've got some momentum, and we'll get that written down and solidified so that we can move forward depending on what happens with the legislature and how we have to deal with virtual meetings following the executive orders. We'll be prepared for that. And so I'm going to stop talking the paint off the wall, but if I miss something, please let me know.
No, that was great. That was a very good comprehensive answer to my question. And this one, there wasn't an ask for additional staff, but just as a final question, do you feel that the current planning and development department has an adequate level of staffing for the new director, or should we foresee in the coming years that they may be requesting or considering an expansion of staff to respond to certain services or changes in planning and development trends?
So in my I don't know, in having not been here all that long, I don't know what it looks like globally from a year after year perspective. I think that, a full-time director, a full-time assistant, and then the office staff that we have certainly provides adequate horsepower. The good news is Tolland is busy. The bad news is Tolland is busy. But I think that there's demonstrated horsepower there. And, I do not personally think, given the other towns that I work with and have worked with, that Tolland is staffed in a manner that is not appropriate, or that leaves people with, sort of a feeling of that they're doing the work of three. Our offices are always going to be in the position of having to be responsive to what goes on. Tomorrow the applications could die off and our workload could get cut in half. But I think that there's adequate staffing to handle the volume that it seems will be coming in for at least the first half of 2021, from what I've seen.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. D'Amato.
Sure.
Anybody else? Okay, I have a couple of questions, but I don't know, Mike, if, in all fairness to Mr. D'Amato, he'll be able to answer them. How you doing there, by the way? I haven't seen you since the last planning and zoning. What was it? Ashford? How you doing?
Ashford, Wellington. Yeah. Well, hit me with whatever you've got. Yeah, I'm everywhere. So just lay it on me and I'll do my best. And if not, I'll get back to you. Okay.
All right. So the temporary help and the clerk I'm on page 112. I'm sorry. I like to give people pages so we can look at it. The temporary help and the clerk. I know why we had temporary help this year, going up from 500 in the prior 2 years there to 1,080, but we're sticking with that same number in 21-22. I was wondering if we know why it's double, and then Lisa, if you happen to know what the actuals are so far this year, and if we're kind of running on track.
Which page was that again, Tammy? Just so I can. 112.
112.
Mike, just so you know, she's referring to the overall budget, the proposed budget book. So this is in the Zoning Board of Appeals, the temporary help for the recording clerk. That's what's being referred to.
Okay.
It's $1,080.
Zoning Board of Appeals. Let me just pull it up and see what I have. So
recording clerk.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the structure of how the recording clerks are paid in Tolland. I don't know if it's by meeting or a set hourly rate, but I did look at, in looking at those revenues that you guys had, based on the number of applications. I don't know if that's sort of they're trying to right size that cost based on the volume, but I'd have to look to see if the structure of how that's paid.
Okay, Lisa, do you happen to know where we are from an actuals perspective on that this year? I know, I see it. Take your time. And that increase in advertising, Mike, can you one more time just say what that was?
Yeah, it says for advertising fees for legal notices. I don't know, Mike D'Amato, is that because there's more of them right now through the ZBA that you're aware of?
Yeah, so, when I see we need, if, assuming the notation for temporary help is the recording, is the clerk, the one who does the minutes, assuming that's what that refers to. So in seeing an increase to recording clerk costs and then an increased advertising costs, that tells me that volume is up. We have, we're required for ZBA to publish basically 3 times, 2 legal notices before, 1 after. If you figure you're running between $100 and something each time, your application costs, if you have an increased volume, you're going to have increased advertising costs, which would then mean more meetings, which would mean more recording clerk. So both of those numbers seem tied to volume to me. I could certainly dig into that a little bit more, but the advertising is mandated by statute, so it would not be an elective cost.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready, Lisa.
Okay, so it's close to 1,700 expended so far. They do get paid by the meeting. And that's a set rate, a contractual rate that they have. So far for the temporary help, that was the Planning and Zoning Commission, correct?
No, it
ZBA,
was ZBA.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was Planning and Zoning I gave you. I'll pull up ZBA. Let's see. Sorry. That one is $360 so far this year. And they again are a set fee per meeting.
Yeah, that was my concern here, that this number is going up again, Mike, when the meetings are, from what I understand, ZBA have been pretty low. So if we're at 360 so far, even if we were to double that from now to June, we're looking at like $700, and we've got 2,200 budgeted, and we're going up to 2,750 next year. So that would mean like
Well, that's the advertising. I think Lisa just gave
No,
you
we have
Oh.
1,080 budgeted.
sorry, you're right. I'm looking at the wrong line.
Yeah, so
Yeah. And it does vary from year to year with this one. Some years it's 600, some years it's,
So I just ran the math, and granted, I am totally out in the deep end of the pool, but it looks like it might be $90 a meeting for the clerk,
is.
just by some of the math.
That
So
is correct.
the 1,080 just assumes they meet once a month. So it puts enough money in the budget so they can pay the clerk if they have an application every month. The 2,750 for advertising assumes a rough legal notice cost of $230 a meeting, which would be relatively reasonable, if not a little under budget, for what you're thinking about advertising, because I generally budget $100 $100 an advertisement, and you need 3 per meeting. So what I didn't put together all these numbers, but my suspicion is whoever put this together, I assume Brian, put enough in the budget so that if they had a meeting every month, they wouldn't go into the negative. So their expenditures are likely going to be lower. It's just a matter of how I'm not sure how you guys prefer to see it. You want to have money in there to support it, or would you rather move it in if they go over? But it looks like it's just budgeting for 1 meeting a month.
They've expended about $1,300 so far, just about. So that's more than where they were last year for the full year.
Yeah.
Or, very close anyway. So it appears that they've had some additional advertisements this year, some pretty hefty ones too. There was one for almost $370 back in October. Some are $240, some are $188. It all depends on how many ads they're putting in each time.
Yeah.
So it was pretty heavy from August through January. February wasn't too bad, but they did have some pretty heavy hitting advertisements.
Okay. thank you. Page 122, planning and zoning. It's the Planning and Zoning Commission. The only question I have on this one is I noticed that we're continuing out the $7,500 in professional services, and I'm assuming that's Dr. Don, but I'm not sure how long we're going to be having a consultant on for that. I thought that expense was going away.
That's a good question. I know one thing I can just share is that last year, we reduced the 7,500. It was 15,000 last year, and we halved it because of COVID. So it's very likely that this other 75 is the other half of last year's request, because we anticipated that there was going to be a lighter usage of Dr. Don because of COVID, and I think now he's extending into the new fiscal year. I think that's my memory of this.
Yes, I'm on the liaison for planning and zoning, and that is correct. In fact, their meetings keep getting pushed because of, things that come up. So he is still meeting with planning and zoning, although I do believe that they had originally planned to have all of his consulting done by now. But they had a fixed amount. So yes, what you're saying, Mr. Rosen, is correct.
Alrighty, that's all that I have for planning and community. You're like released early. Look at that. We got it done too in the 20 minutes.
Great. So
Sorry, usually the public has a chance to ask questions. I don't know if we wanted to see if anybody had a question specifically for him.
Actually, we don't usually do.
Or comments, sorry.
Yeah. So
because they'll be gone by the end of the meeting when we have public participation. I just want to give the public an opportunity to make some comments if they'd like while he's still here.
I think in essence of his time, we'll take the questions back. Mike, does that work if people have any questions for that area?
Yeah, specifically for any of the community development or land use. Yeah. I think Lou has his hand up though.
Sure, Lou?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but I mean, this is just the presentation. That is, shouldn't the questions wait till the actual hearing at the tomorrow? I mean, because that's
the other two meetings that we had, we didn't have public comment
Yeah.
On them. It was just a presentation. So this one, it was still on there, but we're doing it at the end. So if anybody has any questions, we can.
Okay.
Or actually, it's not a question and answer session, though. It's just public comment. So if somebody has a comment or something that they need from us, we can take it back and have Mr. D'Amato look at it. And it can also be discussed in tomorrow's public hearing.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So thank you, Mr. D'Amato. Mike, if you want to continue on.
Sure. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, but thank you to the department and division heads who were here from land use. You guys can go. Thank you for being here.
I appreciate you accommodating me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So moving on to refuse and recycling. So we have, let me just make sure my slideshow is going here. Okay, great. So solid waste services, the town provides curbside residential pickup and disposal of household trash, recycling, and bulky waste. We participate in a regional hazardous waste program, which provides residents with the opportunity to dispose of household hazardous materials during the spring, summer, and fall months. Let me go line by line here. So refuse and recycling collection, this is the overall cost here annually. That's going up about 2.39% or 15,324. I believe I have a slide in a moment that explains a little bit more about that. Bulky waste disposal is up just about $44 this year, it looks like, 2.1%. Refuse disposal is also 6.8, that's up $21,000, it's contractual. And hazardous waste is up 23.81%. Or $2,500 in that category. And I believe my next slide here will go into it a little bit more. Yep. So the overall refuse and recycling budget in total is going up $39,519. The program had an increase in contractual collection fees of that $15,324 and a change in the tonnage estimate causing an increase, estimate and fee, causing an increase in the refuse disposal line item of $21,651. So many people probably are aware of this, but there was a dramatic worldwide change in marketing a few years ago. China Sword, I believe, was the name of it. I remember I was in my previous job when this came about, but the town is under a second. We have 1-year addendums to our contract that we have with Willimantic Waste. We're paying $30.90 per ton for recycling in exchange for keeping the residential units at the 5,200 mark and waiving the collection fee that we have every year in October for the one free bulky waste that we do each year. And we have kept that in the budget again this year. The costs associated with this are charged to the capital account related to refuse and recycling. So this budget extends this agreement. This budget that I've recommended extends the agreement. The only change is an increase to the tonnage to $31.82 for recycling per ton. The tonnage costs associated with the one free bulky waste pickup and the recycling ton fees are estimated at those fees are estimated at $67,000, but we will again charge that one free bulky waste pickup that the benefit that the residents appreciate and enjoy every year is charged to the capital account for refuse. Then Mike Wilkinson in my office, he's the Director of Administrative Services. He wanted to showcase some of the accomplishments that this program has had. So we've seen an estimated reduction of about 50% in the amount of bulky waste tonnage by going to the once a year pickup for that. The town will be organizing the next electronic recycling day at the high school on May 1st from 8 a.m. to 12 noon. Tolland brought in about $350,000 in recycling revenue from July 2010 to June of 2019. The overall refuse and recycling budget is $293,878, or 22% lower than it was in FY12. So this reduction is mainly due to contract and fee negotiation and change in services and how services are provided. And it looks like overall there's been a 9.1% reduction in refuse tons since fiscal year 09. So those are the slides I have on solid waste as we refer to refuse and recycling. Again, Director Wilkinson is in the audience if there's specific questions on this category from the council. Let me stop sharing my screen here.
All right, does anybody have any questions on refuse and solid waste? Brenda?
Yes, thank you. On page 19 of that presentation, just so that it's easy because you have it right in front of you, the hazardous waste went up $1,000 from what the department asked for, and then Mr. Rosen, you ended up adding $1,000 to that. Could you just explain the reasoning? Because I'm just curious.
Sure, I'm going to probably defer most of this category to Mike since he
Okay.
oversees this budget. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so Brenda, similar to regular refuse, because of COVID, a lot of people have spent a lot of time going through their basements and throwing things out. So both in this year and next year, we're estimating a lot more tonnage for hazardous waste. So that's why it's going up slightly. That estimate is broken out by the 14 towns that are part of the Mid-Nerock. And we pay about 11% of that. So that's just our portion. So that's basically what it is. It's just, based on the fact that people are kind of getting rid of these certain wastes that they can dispose of at the hazardous waste site, which is only, it's open a certain amount of time, very limited now with COVID, but in the spring. And so that's the reason for that increase.
Thank you. Have we done any campaigns to share ways that people can dispose of items without going through our bulky waste? For example, the Bye Bye Mattress website, where you can get rid of your mattress for free. And then this way it doesn't go into, the large bulky item pickups, or trying to do some composting programs so that we can remove items from going into our solid waste program. I think there's also information on how to recycle paint cans, with paints at retailers instead of, putting them out for the hazardous waste or wherever they end up going. Have we taken a look at that? Because that would help anything that we can not put into our hazardous waste, bulky waste, recycling, et cetera, is something that's saving us money.
No, yeah, I completely agree. Those are all good points. We have done some of that. I know you've brought up compost before, so I've been looking into it. We can certainly give them more residents more information about the composting. That certainly would help. How they can help compost. I mean, composting is a smaller part of the waste stream, but anything helps, like you said. So we can probably look and probably put something together that would be helpful to residents. I'm not familiar with the mattress program, but we can certainly look into that if it's something that we don't get that many mattresses, but we can certainly look into those type of things.
Right.
You know, like you said, anything helps. So
yeah, and
those are good ideas.
Yeah, I know we don't have a waste station or transfer station or whatever.
Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't get any sleep last night. I'm going on 36 hours right now. Is there any opportunities anywhere that people can drop off items that someone might want to reuse or can, you know, that they do at transfer stations, so that, again, it doesn't go in our solid waste like some people do. You know, you can drop off a toaster or a refrigerator somewhere and it could get recycled or picked up, you know, or an exchange.
Yeah, those are mainly done at transfer station, and since we don't have a transfer station, that would be hard for us to do, because unfortunately in a lot of those situations people drop off things that no one else wants, so it'll ultimately be our responsibility. I mean, it's a good idea. I mean, a lot of people use Facebook Marketplace to get rid of things, but they're selling that. That would be difficult for us to do just because we don't have a site like a transfer station. And like I said, we pick up a lot of stuff that is just left on the road. We fill up probably 4 or 5 30-yarders a year of stuff that we just pick up around town. So that would be a harder thing to do, I think.
That's what I figured, but thank you so much for taking the time to explain that. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, no.
Thank you.
No problem.
John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have a question about the recycling. I'm looking at the bullet point where it says Tolland brought in $349,593 in recycling revenue from 2010 to 2019. I'm curious as to what you think the future holds for that, because I know the market for recycling has pretty much disappeared. So do you see that as, I guess, I don't know if Mike Rosen or Mike Wilkinson wants to answer this, but what do you see that number looking like moving forward?
Yeah, that's the big unknown. We're on a 1-year to 1-year contract with Willimantic Waste. We're actually paying them for the recycling because the market's in such a tank. So, we used to have a really good, we had a really good agreement with Willimantic Waste where we were getting about $25. We signed that basically right before the market started to tank. So we were getting $25 per ton for a while, which was great for us, but it was really bad because the market was really low. So it's hard to see into the crystal ball. I'm hoping that the market will turn around, but we're just taking it year by year. This budget will have us, paying for recycling again, but the good thing is we're paying at a much lower rate than what we pay for refuse. So that's the only good thing. So, but I'm hoping that in the next year or two, we can get back into the black where we're getting, $10 a ton or something like that for recycling. That would be our goal, but it's just hard to say how the market's going to go.
Okay, so there's been really no communication as to what the future looks like with this. We're just going to kind of go year by year. Is that what you're saying?
Well, again, it's a market, so it's just like any economic market. You can try to guess what the stock market's going to do, or you can try to guess what any kind of pork bellies is going to do. But it's the same thing with recycling. So if China changes their stance on how they deal with recycling, if there's newer technologies that better use plastics, that would change the market. But as far as a budgeting process goes, in talking with Atlantic Waste, they don't see anything happening in the next year because of the things I just mentioned. He didn't think anything was going to change. So that's where we are. If we thought there would be an uptick, we would try to, negotiate it back to a something that's in the black. But that's kind of where we are based on what I've been told or discussed.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, John. Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Nuccio. So, Mike, I think you kind of covered most of it with Councilor Falusi's question. So it's kind of that increase for the hazardous waste is kind of variable based on people's behaviors and changes in trends, and then it's sort of a percentage that is reflective of our coordination with those. Was it 11 other towns, or was it 11%?
It's 11%. I think it's 14 towns. I think we pay 11%. It's based on your population. So, yeah, it's just the same thing with the refuse. One of the reasons why I increased the tonnage, the overall tonnage for next year, because over the last year we've just seen an uptick in tonnage, and that's because people are home, so they're throwing out their more garbage because they're eating lunch at home because they're not at work. They're home at the weekend instead of out at a game. So it's all going in our garbage, and we're paying for it. So hopefully that trend will go down. I'm hoping that it will, but you never know. Maybe, it'll just be a continual thing, but hopefully we'll be back to normal, hopefully by the start of this fiscal year.
Okay. And again, this probably is a little bit too into the weeds in terms of correlation, but is there any relation to increases in hazardous waste or waste and tonnage in general in relation to home sales? Because it seems like that, if it's an increase at this point, it seems like in the past year we've had kind of a pretty strong boom in home sales and people moving in and out. So I'd assume that people that are getting their houses prepped for sale might be using more paints and other materials to kind of help upsell it a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I've never heard of that, but it's logical, I guess. If there's more sales, people are throwing out all their stuff and then they're painting their house. So that's logical. I've never heard of that, but I wouldn't. That could be a solid possibility.
Okay, thank you.
We good? All right. I've got nothing for you, Mike.
Okay.
Although, I'm still willing to bargain with you on that Bruins jersey in the background there,
Okay. Yeah, it's my son's. I'll have to let you bargain with him.
Oh,
So,
yeah, right?
yeah.
Does he like cookies? I like cookies.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Okay, Mike, if you want to go ahead and turn it over to
Sure.
Dr. Willett, we can
Sure.
look at the Board of Ed.
Yeah, and I was going to say thanks, Mike Wilkinson. You did a good job, and thank you for clarifying those points. So actually, at this point, I would never want to steal Dr. Willett's thunder, and we talked about this a little bit ahead of time. So, Dr. Willett, with your permission, I'd like you to present this portion regarding the Board of Education budget. So, if you'd like, I can share my screen, and maybe you just indicate to me when you'd like me to go to the next slide.
Sure. Do you want me to
Or do you want to drive? I mean,
do you want me to, I guess if I drive, it'll probably be, but either way, whatever you're comfortable with.
yeah, you can just tell me next slide, and I'll move along. Yeah,
All right,
I figure
so,
otherwise you're gonna have to throw it up on your screen. So
Sure.
okay.
Well, don't feel free to take any lightning of mine you want, as long as I can help. Next slide. So this is basically just kind of a heads up, not only just for town council, but public. The budget site has some resources, and as we go through the process, and continue to go through the process this year, the FAQ there will grow, but right now it does have some items on there that were asked and answered. So we'll just, keep rolling through the year and posting things there as they come up. People can post their budget questions in there as well. So some of the stuff that's in here is pertaining to some of the stuff that was in there. So, but most of the presentation tonight is going over information that has been seen already, so I'll try to keep it pretty brief. Next slide. So and this was something shared with the town council before, I believe, just, some basic points. Obviously, over the years, Tolland's worked really hard to be a good value in many different ways, and education is not the least of which the ways that we've done that. 133 to 166 towns and per pupil expenditure. So, there's a real good value of education here in Tolland. And obviously there's a lot of work that goes into providing that at a reasonable investment point for the community. Tolland Public School budgets have an 8-year average of about 1.44%, 5-year average of 0.9%. Class sizes are respectable, 20 to 21, 22 and 9-12. District average is about 22, as it stands right now. Over the last decade, expectations of the state and federal government have become exponentially larger. There is definitely a lot more that has to be done with the same amount of resources or less. So it's been an interesting decade, really, for education, and the kinds of things that have come on the radar as required, things that we had to do that we never really had to do the same way before. So dollar for dollar, there's just a lot more that has to be done for the investment that we're making. So, again, I think, though, for Tolland, people have been working very hard on the board side and on all sides, really, to try to make sure that, what is available serves the needs of students. Tolland Public Schools perform well, on the SATs, on the state standardized assessments, and the 4-year cohort graduation rate is amazing. It's one of the highest. In fact, I think in 2018 we hit 100%. And we have received accolades from the state on that graduation rate. So just a great place to be, great place to live, a great place to have your kids be educated. Next slide. You are familiar with item H3 from last week's, I think, Board of Education meeting that was shared with the council. These are just some points of information with respect to the budget that the Finance and Facilities Committee put together. And ultimately, they give just a picture of where some of the bigger chunks are and how they come together. The aforementioned total of 872,485 now comprises, 2.2% of the 2.46% in the town manager's budget. I just reported this as it was reported out. So that's why the number is in there as 3.19. But obviously the left side there, or the left cell that starts with salaries and ends with the aforementioned, will give you a good idea of where the majority of the 2.2% of the 2.46 would be. And then obviously we would have to be making some adjustments if that's where it's going. Taking a look again also on the right side, left side, you've all seen it, so I'm not going to read it verbatim, but if there's any questions, I'll do my best. On the right side, just taking a look at other chunks that are part of the budget. Some of these are questions that were already asked as well, but there are some things that need to be recovered in the coming year. And we'll be doing our best to do that. Obviously, there's some grant opportunities there too. So, this just gives you a good sense of, what some of the larger chunks are and what they're, comprised of. Next slide. We, as well as other districts across the entire United States, are facing, we normally face what's, euphemistically called the summer slide. Now we are facing, something we've never seen before, really. It probably was seen in other times in the, history of our country with, other calamities and maybe wars and things that happen. But, we haven't had these kinds of challenges in normal day-to-day functioning. And so it's been pretty clear across the United States, and it's reflected in Tolland too, that, the pandemic yielded, some significant educational impacts, and generally across the United States, 63 to 58% of the learning gains in reading relative to a typical year were happening in about 37 to 50 in math. We're doing a little better than the national average in math, things like that, but we are still seeing significant impacts, which is what this budget seeks to address. And it is something that every single person in the district is working very hard to try to ameliorate as best we can. And that'll also manifest itself in extended school day programs, extended school year programs. We're going to be working to recover from some of these impacts for years to come. And the first year of that is next year. So, we were just getting through the storm this year. Next year, we're starting to, pick up the pieces and make sure everybody's got what they need heading out of, hopefully out forever of this pandemic situation. So next slide. So just as a point of reference, in a typical year, these numbers here, and they've been reflected in the Board of Ed budget document the superintendent's proposed, and I think in what I presented before, there are significant challenges in our day and age with respect to behavioral health of adults and of children. The social dilemma actually is very interesting documentary to kind of look at, to see the impacts of what social media has done on families, on kids. It's worth a look if anyone hasn't had a chance to see it yet. But these kinds of things and the way our day and age has progressed, students are suffering with a lot more challenges from the aspect of mental health and behavioral needs, and behavioral health needs. So in a typical year, we have significant percentages of students, who need assistance, and in our culture, so do adults. And in the pandemic year, these are just exacerbated, which again is what the budget seeks to help balance and ameliorate. We need to be able to provide the student and family need, meet the need where it comes up, and it's coming up regularly. I meet with the school counselors every month now. We have extended conversations. We've updated our risk assessments because we've needed to update our risk assessments now in this new age and to match the increased needs of the pandemic. So these are just a couple of articles. I think it's posted up there too, and they are hyperlinked if people want to take a look. And it just gives you an example of how the pandemic has exacerbated some of the already existing challenges with respect to taking care of children, in their mental health. Next slide. Recovery, remediation, and reform. That's the call for this year as we come into fiscal year 22. We seek to recover some of the program reductions that were necessitated the last year or so. And the pandemic has obviously had impacts on student learning, so there's going to be social and emotional welfare needs that require remediation, addressing those needs and helping our young adults and families overcome. And then, essentially reform. We have been reforming for years. There were things that, needed to be put in place for the Tolland Public Schools with respect to cost avoidance. That stage of the reform is coming to a close fairly soon, and continuing to reform our school district to align it with the way schooling is now working, in 2020, where it's really a competitive environment. It didn't used to be, but now it is. And so, we need to continue that work, create pathways so that the child that, goes, and I've used this before and I beat it to death, I apologize, but, is going to the movie theater when we start going back to that, and they see the big advertisements for the, academies and the aerospace academies and the music and art academies. The truth is we provide programs that are at least equal and almost always better. But without having it structured in a way that really highlights that, we face the danger of attrition, and that attrition can take dollars with it. And it just is the environment that's been set up in the last decade or so. So we just want to make sure that the Tolland Public Schools are positioned to not succumb to that attrition, but to face it head on, create pathways, engineering pathways, music, art, dance pathways. Kids can graduate at the end of their term with a designation or sash at graduation that shows their excellence in these pathways. a particular pathway. And so they're not drawn by the certain charters and others that would say, hey, come here for dance and music, because we have, excellent programs, and highlight those. And through graduation, a student would be able to take that passion and really advance it. And it allows us to focus in ways we traditionally maybe weren't able to. So that's the next stage of that reform, is really making sure that we round that out and have those pathways for students to be able to execute and achieve, that protects us from that kind of attrition. Okay, sorry, next slide. So just in summary, really recovery, remediation, and reform is what we're looking to achieve. Have a great team, a great board, some of the best people I've ever worked with. I'm working with in Tolland on the town side, board side, school side. So we are going to get there. And I have every confidence that that these schools will stay strong and emerge even stronger from the situation that we've been put in. Mike, you're jumping ahead. So essentially, recovery is just recovering it. Remediation is putting in place those services that we need. And reform is basically from cost avoidance to attrition and moving on to pathways and really achieving those pathways to kind of round that out. So finally, and I did answer one of the council members' questions, a little bit more detailed form of some of the collaborations that we've done, town and board side. But this town is it's got some incredible collaborations on board and town side, work that's done together, cooperation, an excellent team on the town side that board side is always benefiting with and interacting with. So examples, the big blaring examples would be ECHIP and USIF, Fields and Grounds. These are the some of the biggest ones, but there's almost, I think, 50 to 100 other in many other ways that that collaboration and work provides dividends for Tolland. So we've got a great group of people working together very hard to make sure we get where we need to be. The school districts, we're going to get through this period of time and come out stronger for it. And essentially, that's just a quick wrap up.
So that was the last slide, by the way. And Dr. Willett, just to let you know, I was letting somebody in, and that's why it advanced the slide, because I clicked my mouse. So
Mike, you're just trying to throw my mojo off, man. That's it. That's what's happening. That's okay.
Yep.
All about the flow,
All flow. No, it's all good. I get it. You managed it better than I would, Mike. I would have probably tripped and moved it forward and backward, and
Thank you, Dr. Willett, for the presentation and for all the work that you guys did between the board and yourself and your staff. So anybody have any questions they want to start with for Dr. Willett? And I just want to say thank you also for sending over the Q&A, because that did help with some of the questions that I had. I still have a bunch of questions, but I think they're not ones that are on there. But if they are, then I'm sorry and beg your indulgence. So you can point me to that was board question, blah, 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 if that's useful. But I tried to remove all the ones that had already been discussed, just for future reference. Lou.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really, it's for the first time, I really don't have that many questions for Dr. Willett. I just wanted to say, I really appreciate the time that he set aside for he and I to meet. We had a discussion on a multitude of different issues that we were very frank and honest with one another. And Dr. Willett, I truly appreciate that, as well as the follow-up information that you provided on the questions that I had, also including some of them inside the presentation tonight. That it really, the information that you provided me in several different documents really helped get a better understanding and really a better grasp on where things are being spent and how things are proceeding. So that's really about it. So I really appreciate that, and I just wanted to say that I've gotten all my questions answered through the question and answer and the exchange that we had. So thank you.
Sure, thanks. I appreciated that too, the conversation. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next. Oh, Lou, you done?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Brenda.
Thank you. Dr. Willett, these comments are for you and for your entire staff, so I please pass them on. Throughout this pandemic, you and your staff have dealt with a different emergency along with the pandemic, the Birch Grove building. We appreciate you being able to handle both of these emergencies with all the professionalism, grace that you have done so far for us. We really appreciate this as a community. While dealing with all of the uncertainties during this pandemic, you guys have ensured that all of our students have had what they needed. You guys treated, you and your entire staff treated all of our families with grace and dignity. You ensured that everybody had their questions answered, even if it was to ad nauseum. The same thing over and over again. I really appreciated having everything up online. It made it so much easier for me to go through all the information. Tolland has greatly benefited from your selflessness and dedication through this pandemic. The extremely late nights that you've worked, the weekends, holidays, and vacations, we know that you've taken time away from your family. You've sacrificed that time for us, and it is not going unnoticed. It is truly appreciated. My question is there anything else we can do to support you in the school system so that we can ensure that our students are getting the best possible platform to move off of this pandemic and move into their future? You have the opportunity, and it's a great responsibility, and I know you take it, you don't take this lightly at all, that 13 to 15 years you invest in each of the children in this school, in this town. And I know that it is a long-term investment, and it is a cumulative investment. If anything goes wrong with 1 year, I know it snowballs. But is there anything that we are really missing that we need to do to help support our students and our staff on the way out of this pandemic? Your expertise and guidance is recognized and really appreciated in this. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That was very kind. I think, I think that so many people are working very hard right now to make sure everyone else is cared for. I know town staff and all of them have been working very hard as well as school staff, and everyone really. It's a complex question. Certainly budget support is always appreciated. So I'll start there. Thank you. And then, on top of that, I guess I would ask on behalf of all staff, since you're asking, just there's a lot of nuance, to the things that we do, the decisions we make, directions that we want to go in. And I think every one of the staff of Tolland will gladly sit down and extrapolate on whatever's needed so that people can come to a broader and comprehensive understanding of any issue that's out there with respect to schools or town. So we embrace that, and look forward to the opportunity to do that whenever anyone in any elected body of any kind wants to get to understand things. So sometimes just knowing that there's many nuances to many things, and the reasons we do some of the things we do, they are always to do our best for Tolland. So that's any investment that Tolland can make into the schools is then something that I would turn around and try to squeeze more out of. So for instance, when we do look for our SLPs, we want those so we don't have to end up paying for them as consultants in specialized programs or requirements in our special services. So if we have them, then we don't have to use consulting for them. And that's the kind of thing that can end up being more than the person themselves. So, whenever we're trying to look forward, we're trying to find the way forward that obviously serves the needs of children, because that is the core purpose of why we're here, but also that does it in a way that is, that is least apt to have, a negative impact on Tolland. So that plays through in everything that we try to do. And I would just say, we kind of never be afraid to engage, come, and you can set up meetings and talk and go through all the nuances of whatever aspect is the person's curiosity.
And while I have the opportunity, I see we have a vast majority of the Board of Ed here. Thank you so much for your work on this budget. The amount of work and questions and contemplations you did, it has been noted, it's recognized that you guys got together and unanimously passed a budget. Thank you so much for all the work you did and for all the questions you asked. Again, very, very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So these are kind of more high-level questions, Dr. Willett, that I had regarding the budget as presented. I guess the first is we've been seeing a lot of increases. The housing market has been pretty much white hot. I think the JI reported that this time last year there were 23 homes for sale, and right now it's 44 in January. Do you feel this budget helps kind of provide a reasonable long-term strategy to respond to shifts in the community population and possibly this potential student population?
It's an exciting trend that you're talking about. And enrollment projections do show this trend, particularly in the K-5 for over the next 10 years. Then, of course, anything K-5 kind of cycles back up. We can expect that kind of surge up to kind of carry through in the following years rather. So enrollment really is stabilizing in Tolland, and overall that enrollment adjustment period, I think that the state Tolland saw has roughly occurred or is in the process of kind of evening out. So we do see a lot of that kind of coming, and I think it's just really important to focus on program stabilization, investment over reductions, and things like our EL service needs. We have had EL, meaning English language learner, for instance, exponential growth. I mean, more than I think anyone ever expected. There's definitely a change coming in and happening in Tolland, and for us to be prepared for it, we need to continually be working to make sure that we're stabilizing all of the pillars that are under us and not putting cracks in them. So our programming, the budgets that are being requested, the Board of Ed put a lot of questioning time, a lot of scrutiny into the process, and unanimously voted for a budget. They know and they want to make sure that there aren't any cracks in the pillars, that we're able to sustain and stabilize and keep Tolland with a high quality of excellence in education and in other ways. So, looking at enrollment, knowing that it's stabilizing, knowing we have kind of almost a bubble K-5 coming, we just need to stay focused on that and make sure that, we keep contributing to that positive development in Tolland and not, create a reason for doubt for people that might look at us as an option.
No, thank you. And I appreciate you highlighting, positivity and promotion, especially when you talk about the movie theater or even the mailers. I think a resident might have reached out, or someone in passing mentioned that, in a single week, they got 3 or 4 mailers from various charter or private schools. Does this budget provide a reasonable advertising budget to kind of rebuke or rebut some of those challengers and, shout to the rooftops how awesome the Tolland school system is?
Yeah, it is an example of the competitive environment we are in. I think when I was growing up, our family did not get flyers trying to draw kids away from their public, their town school system. Some of them are magnets, and then they don't have as much of an impact directly, although tax dollars pay for those magnets, and the dollars going to those magnets are not coming to Tolland. But other things like charters, there are dollars that go with them. So, this is an example, and I appreciate you asking that, of how much more competitive this environment is. There's a lot more to worry about now in terms of making sure that we don't have a slow bleed out of our system of dollars that are needed at the expense of other kids in the system. So, and those are fairly unpopular statements, I think, sometimes from a broader, sense of where people are trying to go with that. But it's just a reality for us in Tolland that the dollars that aren't here aren't ones we can use. So, overall, our numbers have demonstrated, and again, this is the work that we've been doing to try to reduce that attrition and balance out and prevent that attrition to other places. And TPS, Tolland Public Schools have excellent programs. And we serve the student needs, at the higher levels. We have the highest graduation rates, as I said, great scores. I think now really what we need to do is just make sure that we are in the game and on the court and get ourselves into that position with the pathways so that as this becomes a more and more competitive environment, people can't take advantage of the superior advertising, dollars and things that they have. They have an advantage in many ways, some of these places, and what they can promote, how they can promote themselves. We have to work real hard to make sure that the question when it comes up in a child's mind is almost immediately answered with, but take a look at this. Yeah, that you just saw that ad, but take a look at that pathway. Man, that has everything that you could possibly get out of this place you just saw in that ad. So we have to be able to do that by having a compelling program they can see and feel as they're coming up through the system in order to prevent it. And on top of that, we are trying to be very competitive in terms of the kind of media that we put out. We had a serious, serious kind of impact to that effort with the pandemic because we couldn't video and get, it was not positive to see everybody kind of coming together and being together on videos. That wasn't looked at as a positive thing over the last couple of months. But as soon as we can, get some space from ourselves in the pandemic again, we'll start generating a lot of those videos too that I think really highlighted in the past all of the powerful and compelling elements that the Tolland school systems have to offer. And on our website, it's still there under TPS television. You can see some of the older ones that predated the pandemic mostly, and newer ones are going to be coming out soon. So, we're working to make sure that we're very competitive overall, but you'll also see some more aggressive, advertising out there, so to speak, in the next couple of months as well.
No, that's great. And then kind of to lead on to that, a final question regarding positivity. What are you and some of the staff at Birch Grove most excited about with the completion of the school? Essentially, it seems like it's continually on time and on budget, if not possibly ahead of time.
Well, I mean, Birch Grove, I know that I have probably, waxed poetic on this one before, but Birch Grove is an amazing situation for Tolland with, a $46 million building essentially for $6 million. And I know $6 million is not small, but considering the crumbling foundation situation, that is truly just a huge Tolland success story. And in all frankness, I hope that we can all sometimes in the darkest days of what we see, around us and feeling a little harsh, hard, kind of upset inside about what we see sometimes in what happens in politics overall. This is an example of just an amazing success story where Tolland, worked hard, put it out there that it had a need. The state government, state has responded, and I don't think we could have expected a better outcome. I think if we had been told in a time machine, if I went back in a time machine and told people we would get almost 90% reimbursement on a $46 million building, they would have laughed me out of the room. And, especially, Tolland, 90% for Tolland. And that it's just an amazing thing. So there's so many reasons to feel positive. Birch Grove is a huge success story, and great work to the committee, great work to everybody involved there, and all putting, all the school staff also, they're throwing in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to make sure that gets implemented the way that it needs to be for the community. So Birch Grove, I think, is one of the shining examples of just what it can be when everyone's pulling together. And I think that everybody is. It's great.
No, that's great. And I know COVID is still an ongoing in terms of people being together. Is there any opportunity? I remember several years ago when there was some transitions at the middle school, there was sort of like a Make a Difference organization that kind of came together to do some remediation over there, is there going to be any opportunity for people to help out with, teachers and staff as they kind of transition from those modulars to the new school upon completion over the summer? Or is that kind of playing a little bit too long game in terms of what our situation is going to be like with COVID?
That one's a very hard one to answer. I don't know what we'll be allowed to allow and what we will not be allowed to allow. Certainly, we embrace any help that people can give. We did have a volunteer corps at one point. There was about 168 people, deployed in a number of different ways across the district. Tolland's always been a very giving community, and that's another example of the positiveness here. But to be very frank, I expect that to still be curtailed. We still have many things we have to adhere to. So especially, in terms of who and how we're allowed to put things and people together. So we still have to be mindful of that. I guess one of the biggest challenges is everybody wants this thing to be over, and in some people's minds it is, but in a lot of ways it still isn't. We're quarantining. We still have to quarantine kids in large numbers sometimes, and that's a major impact. And so we all want it to be over, and we all want to kind of have everybody come back in and get those 160 volunteers moving in again and all that, but we will have to be mindful and careful so that we are continuing to be part of the solution and don't become part of the problem. But I'm optimistic. I think we're getting there, and I think we will see the ability to include people in more and more places where we used to as next couple of months and even the year progresses.
No, that's great. Thank you very much, Dr. Willett.
Of course.
Okay. Brenda, is your question a short question because you already went?
Yes, yes. And I know, I figured you'd ask me at the end. It is very quick. I just wanted to ask something about what Mr. Jones was asking about.
Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Willett, can you just expand for 30 seconds on the magnet schools? So when one of our children in Tolland goes to a magnet school, that comes out of your Board of Ed, or a part of that comes out of the Board of Ed. In what grades do magnet schools typically be?
Well, not all magnets will take actual dollars out, although the magnet thing, and just depending on how you look at it, the magnets exist with somebody's money, and that's your money. So, what isn't going to Tolland, what is going to magnets in Connecticut is not going to, a school like Tolland, for instance, or our school system. Having said that, there are charters where those dollars actually do go with them. And so whether it's magnets or charters, I think it's important to make sure we're providing the most competitive program that we possibly can. That way it does keep these kids together. I've heard a lot of different stories about kids' experiences, some very good, some not good at all. And, over time, just knowing what we have here, I know that there's really nothing out there that's done better than the way we do it here. Tolland is an exceptional place. We want to stay that way. And, losing human capital to any other place is not a great thing for us. So, to the extent that magnets impact us, a lot of those magnets are just dollars that are just not coming here from state and feds. And some of the charters, those are dollars actually leaving. So it's just a combination of both that is not a great thing for us to have happening. And personally, I just don't want to be at the helm of a place where those numbers are skyrocketing, because I think that would be a bad indication for our schools in town overall.
Cool. Thank you. And I thank you for your indulgence for allowing me to ask a second time around. Appreciate it.
No problem. Now we're back to Lou. Go ahead, Lou.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I promise it's just, again, another follow on to what's already been asked. Dr. Willett, do you have any numbers as far as the actual numbers of students that we have going to these magnet schools or charter schools?
Yes, that is in the Board of Ed budget booklet. I'm just see if I can pull it.
I know,
up.
I'm sorry, I know that you provided it to me, but I'm just trying to find it and I can't find it on.
No, not at all. I'm not saying.
Page 32.
Yeah, I'm not saying you should know off the top of your head at all, but but it's in there somewhere. I know, I want to say like 170, 150 to 170, because over the years it fluctuates a little and it used to be more.
But I mean, for this given year, I'll find it. I'll just, I'll try and locate it in the documents that you gave me. So,
So yeah, it's right now, it looks like about 175,000. And the count, is about 32,
32.
I think. Yeah.
It's on page 32 of the budget, the Board of Ed budget, if you want.
okay, awesome. All right. Thank you very much. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay. That was actually one of my questions, Dr. Willett. So, I'm going to jump ahead to that question. And it's just because I've been in a couple of meetings where they've been talking about magnets and charters. And I was wondering, I'm trying to look for where my question is on that. Either way, I'll get back to it. What I was wondering is, how often do we update these numbers? And is that 32 a good number for this year? Because I was in a meeting with somebody and they were saying that Tolland had like 70 something between charters and magnets, VOAGs and everything else. And I don't think we were ever really at 70 something.
I don't know. We'd have to give me more details on that one, but this is generated, every year, the business office goes through and does an audit of who's going where and who's projected to go where, et cetera. So, so I don't know what that other one is reflecting, but I would be happy to take a look at it. It may be that something about it just doesn't fall in those categories. Maybe it includes private schools or something like that. I don't know, but I'd be happy to kind of look into it further if you want.
Yeah, I didn't want to, I'll talk to you about it offline, but yeah, I just wanted to make sure that because I kind of went back and said Tolland has 32. So I just wanted to make sure that I knew that we were updating ours. That was the actual number. It wasn't something else. So
Yeah, I mean, I know that we also have had, there's more, I mean, just in general, riffing off the same conversation, there's more homeschooling kids now, and there's probably especially more private school kids now. Across the United States, I think that went up by 3%. So I'm not sure, how that impacts that, but I'm always happy to talk, whenever you want, kind of thing.
yeah. Okay. So my questions here. First of all, I just wanted some of my questions are related to the COVID stuff that's going on. And I know that you just recently got I believe you got the new numbers from the federal allocation that shows how much is going to be coming to all the towns. So one of the questions that I had with somebody else was basically around making sure that we're utilizing the funds that come. And I know 20% of the money that comes has to be used for either summer school or extended learning for the slippage, like you said, the loss of education time in the classroom, and for kids who are demonstratively falling behind. So I was wondering, and that's supposed to be a 2-year allocation, the 461,000. So I was wondering how much of this budget in here is COVID related, and I want to kind of challenge us to look at this. The way I was prompted to look at it myself was if we're seeing increases in tutors or special services, or we have to add somebody for learning loss stuff or cleaning supplies, computer stuff. Like there was a pretty broad push to look for what can be classified as COVID to be able to use the federal money that we have, because it is such a specific classification of what we can use that money for. So I'm wondering if you could, and if you don't have it now, if it's something that you could pull together. I'm sure you probably don't, so I'm just putting it out there. But what we can kind of take from this budget as this is something that's COVID and can go towards that $461,000 that we're getting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're referring to the American Rescue Plan, right? CT2, and I think just signed in. What was it, this week or whatever? Last 7 days, something signed into law. So I think we're all cautiously optimistic about this. Part of my trepidation around it is just is really twofold. One, I like to, I kind of count it as, something we can count on as soon as we get the final, transfer, or that they make it more clear exactly what we can and can't use it for. They do and have said, I guess, in the Ed and Labor Department, that it's for repairing ventilation systems and reducing class sizes and social distancing and purchasing personal protective equipment. And then it has a section, I guess, although it's really not super well defined, because I keep sending Courtney's office questions about it. What is support staff in terms of what they say it is versus what we can actually use it for. So I need clarification on that. And to your point, you have to reserve 20% to make sure that you are funding learning loss. So, I guess if I had to interpret, learning loss, things like that, we're talking extended school year programs, extended school day programs. These are things we're already taking action to try to provide, but they do end up being pretty costly. I think that when I see money like that coming, and they're calling it, ESSER 3, but when I see money like that available, it usually comes with some kind of strings. In other words, I'm wondering if the federal or state government is going to hold us to a higher level of accountability for special populations, knowing that these funds have been provided to the schools. They may, and they use special language for this, they may require certain things they're not requiring now. Usually something, you never get something for nothing. And so I think that, even those funds are in response to a national recognition of the pandemic's impact. And so once they've delivered these funds unto us, they can then expect from us, X, Y, and Z with respect to special populations. So I think there's probably going to be more to this book than is available right now, because right now it's only like, when I'm asking questions, people are doing their best to provide answers, but it's like a paragraph. It's a couple of bullet points in a paragraph. And we all know that, a lot of times how that pans out is quite different. And even how the Connecticut Mirror at one point reported we were getting, 139 or something, and we got 88. I just think we have to watch, and watch this carefully to see. But where I see it making its, impact is really when we start looking next year at extended school day, extended school year, things like that. What we'll be doing this summer, next summer, maybe the summer after that. I think these funds will be available and able to be used over a series of years. And we have to look at the long game, not just 1 year on that one. So for instance, we can get by with funding, the social worker, school counselor this 1 year here, but this may make it possible to provide those behavioral, social, emotional supports for a longer range of time. And it seems like that's what they're expecting, because they're talking about in general language, implementing things that provide for students' health and care. So I see this as being gobbled up over a series of the next few years, just trying to maintain status quo with some of the new challenges the pandemic has sort of left us with. Much like after a hurricane, we're picking up for a while. We're going to be picking up some of the pieces here. But once again, we're going to do it very well, and we're going to get kids exactly what they need. But I can see that being a long game, and I can see these funds working into the long game, that type of thing.
So you don't think there's anything in like the tutors or the cleaning supplies or anything that we saw increases in this year that we could attribute that might be smaller dollars rather than just the extended calendar that we may be able to kind of take out? Because there's another piece of legislation that they're looking at putting through to make sure we're spiking these out of MBR.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm hopeful, but where I see this thing making the biggest impact for us is how they define support staff, because PPE, things like that, we have a few mechanisms where we don't get a lot of actual support per se sometimes is in being able to actually provide staff. So that's why I would be cautious myself about applying this too eagerly too early, because I think we just have to be very careful about what the long range impacts will be. And I can see this, if it does allow us to extend out a few years, kind of pushing out and extending that benefit to those years, and not necessarily concentrating it too much now. We do have a lot of things that we are mitigating with grants that we're receiving. A lot of that's worked into the budget, but I would be cautious. And I mean, hey, listen, at the end of the day, you're probably going to know sooner than I do, Tim. But
I'll make sure you get it right away.
the state, you're right there in the capital. So, I mean, somebody's got to be telling you something. But I will say that, I am, whenever federal dollars come our way and, blessed by the state, something comes with it. And I'm not running around, with a party hat yet. I think it's probably going to help us over a series of years to balance out the impacts that we are already seeing now. So I just want to be careful about it.
Okay, this is another, before we get into the whole, the questions regarding specifically to the budget. So one of the questions that I've asked a couple of times, and you've answered every time, is to just kind of get an updated look at where are we right now for actuals. Last time we had talked, I believe it was a little over $1 million that you thought there was a possible opportunity with, but you weren't 100% sure. So I'm looking to see if you think that there may be opportunity in there again to do some pre-purchasing, because there's a couple of items in here as we get later on that are kind of like there's 3 things that are $250,000. So I was just looking to see if how we're feeling about actuals, and if there's any opportunity for any kind of pre-purchase in here.
Yeah, I mean, I know everybody feels this. It's been an exhausting year, and the downside of it being an exhausting year is I think we see a lot of burnout with people trying very hard to balance everything. The upside of that is that we've worked with a lot fewer staff than we usually, have and need. And you see the impacts of that because we've had people quit and leave. They're carrying bigger burdens than they can carry, and so it's been unreasonable what's been expected sometimes, and we're balancing that. But for those reasons, I think that the upside of such a thing, and the upside of people, not wanting to be in environments like schools for whatever reason, because I think they are very safe, is just that we will probably have some funds at the end, and the Board of Ed has been looking at that, asking a lot of questions about that. Finance and Facilities is all over that, wanting to know. Meeting happening this coming week, I think, where we're going over some of that information. So we will, like the end of last year, we'll be looking, and the board will be looking at what the options are and what's available. So I think that reasonably we would see something available, but I think the FFC has to really take a look at that to figure out where that is, what they want to do, and so on. But there's as and frankly, every time I talk about anything that's available, there's about 10 things that that can be used for, that everybody's really eager to have done, and all 10 can't be done. So there's always multiple uses for anything that's available, and I think the FFC and the board will ultimately just have to decide where it wants to position those those things and those requests and those needs.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. One of the questions that I had regarding to the additions of the staff was the speech or intervention increases, if there would be a way to kind of classify those as a COVID-driven need.
So up to now, no. Because I was looking at that, we did move 2 positions over to grant for that reason, and toward that endeavor to try to take that off operating. So we do see
I'm
the
sorry,
social.
can I interrupt you 1 second? Can you just clarify for me, as you said that, I know the social worker, the middle school social worker went over to the grant. What was the other one? Because I thought I had 2 social workers, but I don't think that's right. I think you said it
No,
was
school counselor.
School counselor.
Yeah, like social worker, can be specialized. Social workers can help people with all kinds of social anxiety issues. They can help people with eating disorders, all kinds of things. And, school counselors are working with day-to-day kids' social emotional needs with respect to specific things that, we usually do, say, at a middle school to support kids that the state kind of expects us to do, and, programming that we're expected to do. And in our case, the school counselor that is there is also part of the rebirth of the Skills for Adolescence program that was lost, years ago, and now is kind of reborn through this particular position, and has been quite effective, and got some really good data on some very positive impacts from that. And we needed it. We were showing that we needed it. So, these are things a school counselor would be more apt to be in a classroom doing something like that, and as well as other kinds of lessons, and then comes out and also provides social emotional support for kids. And then school social workers are usually more laser, they're more focused out on families and family challenges, things like that. So, and they may have skill sets that are more specialized, that can help serve students. For instance, young ladies in the middle school these days are hit with so many images of things in our culture that there's a lot more eating disorders. And I'm pretty sure the DSM-7 has a new word for eating disorder, and I'm not using it right, but there's a lot of that going on, more than most of us have ever seen. And it's connected to anxiousness. And so having people specifically skilled in certain specific things is really important when they come, kids come presenting with needs, because they can result in, just like there can be academic, first of all, it's morally and ethically and professionally necessary to serve in this way. But also, if we fail to do so, that can result in the need to do it through other means and other programs. And those are often not more efficient means of getting that done. So it's just a massive benefit. And so what we've done is that social worker and school counselor are on the grant side and not in the operating side, which is one of the reasons why we were able to go down that 358 to the 319.
And those are the ESSER grant dollars that we're using for them. Okay, so the speech and interventionist, you're saying we really can't chalk them up to COVID.
The reason and when I explored this and asked some questions, I wanted to make sure that this couldn't be slapped back at me later, in sort of saying that we did something that would have been supplanted otherwise in the terms that are used. So the purpose and the reasoning is these were grant funded positions anyway, so we're not supplanting. These are our positions or positions that when I asked the questions with the state, they fell within the social and emotional aspects of what was supported. So because they were SEL and because they were sport and because they were from grant, theoretically, we weren't supplanting. We were, providing additional support. And that's how I could make that argument. And I feel like I could defend that argument if somebody came knocking at the door and saying, wait, that's supplanting. I would say they were grant and we're moving it to grant. So it's not really supplanting. It's needed. I probably, would need to get that in there somewhere, but I can make that argument, I think, very effectively with those two positions. Part of the problem with the SLP stuff is that would be really supplant, because it's not a grant position. It's I can't fund it really that way. We have consulting services right now that are impacting us more broadly than ever in that area. There is a very clear sort of breadcrumb trail all the way back to this not being something that could be supplanted. This is something that is has to exist as a position in the district, and there is not a grant to fund it. So I tried to position us in the way that could be most safely interpreted in any direction as, not supplanting, so to speak.
Yep. Okay, this next question, I wanna preface this as, this is something that we've talked about in the past and people have reacted poorly to it. And I think it might be the way that that I'm asking the question or explaining it. So I want to be really clear and try to take a different track on looking at it. One of the things that we've been doing in the school is, like you said, using your budget and your words, the reform and looking at, Tolland back 5 years ago. I think you had a presentation, you showed us where we had one of the highest amount of costs for outplacements across other schools that were like us and everything else. And you and your team have done a lot of work to try to improve the offerings in town and look at providing these kinds of services here and, keeping kids in the environments that they live in and everything else. So talking about specifically the LEAP program, it was always, when it first came into existence, it was touted as, it was going to be the cost reducer. It was going to be a way to avoid cost. And it was going to keep kids here in the district. And we were going to build that program and eventually, hopefully, have it be a revenue driving program. So I know I've asked in the past, I know we've gone up we're up about 28 students now, and I believe we're in all 4 schools now with LEAP, whereas we had that one centralized area, and now it's in all 4 schools, which is good. And I'm just hoping at some point we can look at the LEAP program and provide the cost benefit analysis, not the social, emotional, and all of that, but just to go back to what we were outplacing before, the costs that we were doing, and what this program is costing us, and how it's either avoiding it or just the value for it across the board. And when we can start to really kind of push to get it to be the revenue generator that we talked about it being in the past. Because if we get more kids in it, then that helps defray the cost per student. But I think it's important for us to understand the programs that we're putting in place, the pathways, the lighthouse, all these things that we talk about on making Tolland better and having revenue-driven opportunities for the town to actually be able to quantify that. So it's not an attack, it's not a criticism, it's more just how do we get down to looking at the value, like what is it costing us to do these programs and how does that help us from where we were to where we are now?
So I feel like we have actually done that, and we've done it a couple times and provided that information a couple times. But I am always happy to, especially if somebody wants to come in individually or small group, I can go over it for a couple hours. But I think we definitely have done that. I don't think it's difficult to do that. I think that I just want to try to find a way to talk about these types of things without, to your point, seeming like, wanting to be a lack of transparency or not answer questions, things like that. That program is not really specifically one of the enrollment programs as much as it is a program that does 2 things. One, it is the appropriate moral and professional response to kids in need in this community. And as a special ed program, that's crucial. Maintenance of effort is a factor. There's all kinds of factors that go into it. And the fact that it's in each of the schools was by design because those children needed it before it existed. The fact that it's in each of those schools just means that we're actually serving those kids in each of those schools. It didn't just magically sort of take, and create the need, it's responding to the need. And it's not a completely unusual idea. It's actually in effect in other places too, because special education in Connecticut is exorbitant. It's unreasonable. Some of the costs of it have been quite unreasonable. So it's and that it's not a very difficult thing to quantify. That's why I feel like we've done that in the past, and of course I can do it again. But the even reimbursement rates we get for each child are so paltry, and the amount we have to spend in district on each child before we even get reimbursement is extensive. With like almost 76,000 before we even hit the threshold. This is not a difficult program to justify from a monetary standpoint. I just worry about us, and to be very frank, and just with all due respect, a town council questioning a special education program value like that, I just have an aversion to it. That doesn't mean I disrespect the council. I think there's anything wrong there. I think it's just, we have to kind of be careful about that particular aspect of things. Back office stuff I get. Special education programs, I think we're walking down a path that's kind of questionable, but I say that only with the highest level of respect for the intentions behind it. So I think what I would recommend is just even having you sit down with me for a while and let's go over some of that. I'm willing to do that with anybody, but I think I'm not worried about showing its value because it clearly has one, but it is really, it is our professional and moral obligation to offer the programming that the kids need. And we do it as good or better for, as good a price tag or better than any of these other places would. And that's just from years of experience, knowing that.
Okay, so any of the other programming or anything that we've put in place from a revenue perspective, how far off do you think we are to actually being able to generate incoming tuition from those?
So that's the third tier of what, euphemistically is Lighthouse. There was trying to prevent, people from trying to make the school district as competitive as possible in the ways that, it's always been an awesome school district, but making sure everybody realizes how great it is so that they don't choose the ballet academy over it. That was the preventing or, working aggressively to try to prevent attrition. The cost avoidance was programs like this and other programs that are implemented to provide that cost avoidance and provide those services in-house. What you're talking about is really the third tier of the overall program that was, part of Lighthouse, so to speak. And that one is the last tier. That's the one that, we would be attempting to enter now. And it does rely heavily on support so that we can make sure that we get these pathways in place. One of them, an example would be engineering. We were starting to work on that when the pandemic hit. We had to kind of retool everything, and people that were working on that now became people leading up the online remote learning department, so to speak. And we had to retool over here and kind of refocus to get through the pandemic. But once we get our feet back under us here, we're going to go back in the direction. And one of the first things you'd see was engineering, for instance, as a pathway. That part of it has to first be developed as something that keeps kids from going to an aerospace academy. And then eventually, we would be wanting to expand that further to have kids, see how valuable that program is and want to come here for it. So coming here for it is a few years away. I mean, getting us to the point where we have the pathways is the first part of that. And then I do feel that we'll see students wanting to come here for it. There was a prospectus done a couple of years ago on business that, again, the pandemic really kind of derailed a few things we were trying to do, but that does show that there are some real opportunities here for us to reinterpret what the state is doing, because I'll be frank with you, you're at a disadvantage. I mean, Tolland as a school system is looked at almost like, I don't mean Tolland specifically, but the public school systems in the communities are almost looked at as part of the problem, not part of the solution. And I propose that we can make a school district like Tolland, in the eyes of the state, a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. And I think that we have to. It's vital for us to be able to rewrite that narrative so that it's not looked at as the magnets and charters are the savior of the state, but that individual school districts like Tolland can provide something that would also allow for the same kind of opportunities for students to come together that any magnet and charter can. So I think there is room in there for us to assert ourselves in that way. And to make that happen in the decade I have left, say, in this career path, I would like to see that be what happens before I ever left as the third tier of this lighthouse. But it is the tallest climb in some ways. And so the very first part of that is just getting our pathways established so that, a child kind of looks at us and says, well, I don't need that aerospace academy. I see this pathway of engineering having everything that I'm interested in it. And I want to be there. And then we would perhaps be able to leverage that so that people that are outside our district would say, man, that's a pretty amazing program. I'd like to see if I can get my child in that program. And we did see some sparks of that, but that's really where that tuition bearing, as I've used the term, would be coming. We will get some of that through our special services programs, just out of the nature of surrounding districts not having what is needed. They'll be desperate to find a place to put some people that are not well served. But I see the tuition bearing really being us being able to be viewed as, as an opportunity rather than as part of a problem that people think has happened, that people more broadly feel like is happening in Connecticut. And I think if we do get to segue in that direction, the solution that we could put in place would actually be a model at some point that that I think could be used. But I think we have made a lot of success in our first two tiers here, which is avoidance, limiting some of the attrition. Now is the time that we could start to do the pathways, and that's the first step of what you're talking about.
Okay, thank you. The ESSER 2 funds, what is the balance left after funding those two positions? And do you have defined use for that? And also, it had originally talked about ESSER 2 also, this is the ongoing thing, is they're talking about the extended school day or year for the kids with slippage. So with that in mind, can you tell me if we have a plan going forward on how we're looking at having an enhanced or expanded summer school option for kids who are struggling this year with online learning and the changing format back and forth?
Yeah, and I appreciate the question of, are we complying with the kinds of things that ESSER would be, laying out for us? And so basically, for ESSER 2, there's about 61,000 that's left really from that at this time, off the top of my head. And I would be applying that towards the extended school year. And normally our programming would go 4 weeks into the summer. We're going to go 6 weeks into the summer. We're going to expand it to not just special service populations, but also inclusion, intervention rather, populations. This is all really by necessity too. This is not like, I don't think, I'm not throwing it out there for a pat on the back. This is like an absolute necessity. And so that's why those exist. That's part of why the federal government is doing this, is they know that we need to do this. So we're expanding that program from 4 weeks to 6 weeks. We're expanding the number of hours. We're expanding the population included in the programming. And so intervention students are general education students. They're not special education students. They're part of the SRBI-RTI group that needs support. So that's where the balance of the ESSER 2 is going to go, is getting us through that summer program and then possibly into next year with extended school day. But specifically into extended school year, expansion of that program, that's the most immediate. And then that's why I speak of the American Rescue Plan funds. That's not something that's going away. I mean, we probably need to be doing that for a long range period of time. And that's going to have a much faster burn on our fuel, so to speak, than would normally be the case. So, we've got to be mindful that this is a long game, not a short game, and look at it that way.
So just as a little bit of history, I believe this was before you came. I do think it was before, I think Mr. Lincoln was, yeah, it's been a while, but one of my daughters had a great program. It was a before school reading program. It was kind of like the intervention for the kids who were struggling with reading, and they would all go sit in Parker in the cafeteria. And there was a couple of paras or aides in there, and they would get like 30 minutes in the morning before school started to read. So just throwing it out there, it was a great program. I know we don't, it'd just be a good one. The COO position, is this a position that is instead of an assistant superintendent, or is this a step to take on in addition to an assistant superintendent or curriculum director?
No, well, just to circle back on one thing there, just as a point of interest for the reading stuff, just to give you a kind of sense. You know what, they did a survey a few years ago and determined that our universities and our programs overall for teaching and educators was not adequately preparing people to be able to teach reading
Gotta read.
in the way that people needed to learn it cognitively. So, you know, there's a lot of programs on paper that look great, but what we're learning is we really need very highly trained people for kids that are specifically in that age group of pre-K to 2 and even to 5. And that if we aren't using these highly trained people and we're not providing them with the training that they didn't get in the college programs, that it has modest and sometimes not even you know the effects that we would want for the long-term health of the child from an academic reading standpoint. So that's, even to give you an example, another layer these days where they recognize that those teachers just were not given the training that they needed. And that's why you see the birth of so many programs now. And even the way they've reclassified dyslexia, that's a whole new game. Never, ever did they understand it the way they understand it now. And that has changed what we have to provide for resources 100%. So things that were never really needed to be invested in, for instance, you could throw a couple of paras at a problem. You can't do that anymore for two reasons. One, they know what it takes to make that difference. Beyond just people feeling good about it. And also they now, because of the understandings they have about things like dyslexia and so on, they expect it. It's not just, do it because we want to provide that extra service. It is expected. And if one can't do it, then you risk having, those children get that service elsewhere, which again, from a professional ethical point of view, want to make sure we get it here, but from a cost avoidance, it just makes total sense to make sure your phonics programs are happening, your SPIRE programs are happening, your literacy programs are happening, and they're happening with people who know what the heck they're doing and are training well, because otherwise, we pay the price much more dramatically in other ways. On to the COO position. Nope, that's actually right now attempting to position the district in the best possible way, in that it's a reorganization of how we do things internally to try to provide, it's actually a CPO now in its latest evolution, because COO was sort of the beginning concept.
Yeah, like
So
3
it's
PO?
chief, yeah, that's right. It's a robot. The robots are taking over. It's gonna
Listen,
be
he's all
C3PO.
gold, like I'm saying that there's some value there.
That'll be great. I can just send the robot in to do, all kinds of little
The
tasks.
kids would all pay attention,
You can come to the meeting like now, what is it? And then just give you an answer. I'm sure it'll be much more efficient than I would be, at least for words. But anyway, it's a CPO, so Chief Personnel Officer, and then it encompasses a lot of things that would have been something that an assistant superintendent would have done, but it's at a price tag of 40,000 added versus 175,000 plus other things. What it also does is it positions Tolland for the future, because you're building off of a position that exists, and someday down the line, when things change, you actually would then maybe have a vacancy that had not a long jump up to an assistant superintendent at some point. It wouldn't be as big of a leap, and that could be classified in a way that is personnel or administrative, that type of thing. And so it positions the future for a change that would not be at a big impact. And it also reorganizes our operations now so that, hopefully we can balance out some of the things that were overwhelming even before the pandemic. So it's a $40,000 solution to a $175,000 problem right now. And, I think that it's an effective way of getting to that. And the board, it was very important to them to provide a solution that was not going to put, weight on the community any more than needed to be. I think they were really appreciating that there was a need here for a different structure. But I think they were also very mindful not to, add something to the budget that, that wasn't teachers and would likely be a heavy lift So there, I think it was a really good way of moving it forward, and in a reasonable price point, so to speak.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm gonna get into my line by line stuff. And I don't have like I said, I think some of the questions that I had were answered in the documents you sent over. So again, I appreciate that. Line 195, severance pay is staying flat. But I know we've seen a lot of fluctuation in that over the last couple of years now. I was wondering if you could kind of give us an idea of where we are for that now, and if you think that this is something that's going to stay flat over next year, or if that is going to change.
Well, I mean, and again, I can take and look at that in a more detailed manner, giving a little bit more time to that question. But
I
right off the
can gladly send you these questions also, because I know that would be useful, because then we have to meet on Tuesday to decide. So
yeah, I mean, yes, please, just send them over, and that could provide more maybe detailed response. But off the top of my head, severance is a very difficult one to 100% predict, because it has a lot to do with the fluctuation in our human workforce. And I would say that I guess I can put it this way. I don't think that things have become less complicated. I think things have become more complicated, and something that provides sort of a mean or averaging of that, or just a general conservative approach to it. Because things are more complicated than they have been, I would expect that that we would probably be in need of a line that is funded in the manner that is funded. In a normal year, that there are fluctuations in that, and in the year that we're in the year that's coming, there's just a lot more that we have to be thinking about from a workforce perspective. So I can see that being a line that lives up to the requests type of thing.
okay. The next one is the course reimbursements. I know that we always talk about there's a possibility and it might happen and all that, but like the spend now, I'm tracking back like 7 or 8 years now. Like we're never hitting the 50,000 that's in there. So it's usually around the 20,000 mark. Is there anything to lead us to believe that this 50,000 is what we're going to need?
Well, it is part of a contractual obligation that we have to provide it. So, there's things that kind of play in that way. And it ends up offsetting. And to give you, I forget, at one point I had answered this and provided like some of the places that those funds go that cover similar bases. But in terms of the pandemic, one thing we have noticed is people have been very bored, and they are actually enrolling in online courses and things like that because, well, they had nothing else to do. And so they're expanding their own knowledge base in a way that they haven't before. So we are seeing more of that, and I do expect that to be, kind of impacted because of it. But that line has traditionally played into others as well. It's a conglomeration. So it does have, I can provide a little bit more narrative as to exactly how that falls out. I know I've written it here somewhere in the past, and I'll just pull it back out. It is something that goes to a number of different things ultimately. So, but in just, being most direct about it, I do see that people are making requests against it, obviously for coursework. Some of it is available depending on how many people actually avail themselves of it. And I do think that we are getting more people availing themselves of it just because of the way things are right now.
Okay. Line 516, transportation. Can you just give us just briefly like a little information on why that number is going down this year?
Which one?
516, transportation. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not transportation. That's I think it's 561. No, what the heck is transportation?
510. It's 510.
510. Sorry. Why did I have 516?
That's okay. I mean, there is transportation. There's student athletic transportation for 50, and so your 516, I think, does cover student athletic transportation and activity transportation. There's a couple of different transportation. So like 516, and it rolls. I mean, the one that you're looking at is probably in a conglomeration of a couple of them. So I'm just trying to check a couple of different things here to See if I can give
Yeah.
it a five.
I would think that
510.
athletic
So
and student activities was like pretty much, yeah, this year, hardly anything, but the.
yeah, well, and that's true, but of course, next year we expect that to be different, and in the spring, thank God, hopefully it will be different because the kids need it. But and we in some other ways we're going to be a little negative because we collect pay to play funds that are going to be largely not collected for most of the year. But in the spring, hopefully, balance out a little bit. So there'll be some areas running negative, even though we have some areas that are not running negative, to your point. So it'll probably balance out in some ways towards the end. 510 there is student transportation services, and then 514 kind of rolls 514 and 516, which also has athletic and student activity and transportation in it. But let me just pull up something really quick. So I'm just trying to pull that one number, and it's not coming up. Maybe. So, I mean, just off the top of my head, without being able to pull that up right now because it's not cooperating with me. This tends to cover a lot of different things. 510 covers even things like graduation shuttle buses. We'll have kids sometimes that need to be shuttled around, and so there's different aspects of the budget and that's not a big one, but just to give you an example, it goes pretty wide. Extended school year transportation is probably going to be a little bit more, but that affects it. Transition, special education transportations, pre-K transportation, depending on the situation, sometimes that fluctuates. There's a number of things that roll into that transportation number that one may not necessarily think about, like dedicated van pickups and shuttles of students as part of even some of the programmatic things that they're in or required to be a part of. The school district must provide transportation. A student who goes to a student who goes to a VOAG school, the district is on the hook for some of that depending on the situation. So there's, that also is something that the district would pay out to a certain threshold from the state. So, or provide it themselves. There's a couple of ways that can be handled. So it can fluctuate greatly depending on the number of kids that are in and need certain services and conditions. And so that one is one that can go up, down, all around, and even monthly fluctuate. We could have a month that's really bad and a month that's really good. But overall, we do try to make sure that we're not in the hole for that type of thing. And I think we've on the whole done a pretty good job of that.
Okay, a few of my other line item ones, I'm just gonna send them to you, and then if you want to send back the answers on those, we can look at that. So one of the things that kind of caught my eye, two things. There's a grant for 15,000 for mental health grant and stipend payment. Can you just kind of give us a little bit of understanding on what that's being used for?
Are you talking about the grant page of the BOE budget kind of thing?
There's a, well, yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm looking at the same thing you
Yep,
are.
there's it's a new grant, 21-22, primary mental health program. Looks like it was here in 18-19 and then it went away for
Yeah.
2 years.
We are trying to get that back. That's in the earlier grades. And it provides services for kids at the youngest level for primary mental health grant. There's other things in there too that also do that. And most specifically, the ESSER things most recently do that. Some of the title funds do that too, depending on, you don't get a ton of money out of some of the title ones, but you can apply those. So, we do, everywhere we possibly can apply any of the grant funds that we get to the service of making sure the kids have what they need. And sometimes what's available to us fluctuates. It can also fluctuate based on who's available to write them. Right now, one of the things that has happened when we lost a curriculum director is that person used to do a lot of these title ones and everything. So I do get, for instance, our science supervisor does the Perkins grant. Obviously special ed will work for IDEA, and I end up being involved in getting the academic and social support grant done. Title 4A I do. So we have divided amongst ourselves a lot of the grant writing and acquisition that used to be done by positions that are no longer here. And sometimes that can get a little hectic and crazy. One of those is like the primary mental health grant. And we did have people dedicated to that that we then weren't able to have. So, or not in that role anymore. So we're hoping to make that back up, and that is something that I think we can reinstate. I think at one point they paid for the Bears program with that, but I would have to check. So it's part of the younger grades and the primary school where it makes its biggest impact. And once again, like what we can do for grants also depends on who we have to do it. And so we are working really hard to make sure that no balls get dropped and that we can avail ourselves of everything available to us. And we'll continue to do that.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things that I noticed is if we added line 359, which was professional technical, 641, which was textbooks, and 646, which was curriculum material, we're going up about $250,000 between those three things. And when I look down in the details at the program budgets and such, it's kind of a two-part question. I was hoping you could kind of give us some insight into the $250,000 and what's driving that large number of an increase. And then the second half of that is when I was looking at the program level budgets, we're going up in LA, 163,000. We're going up in math, 44,000. We're going up in science, 26,000. But social studies was staying the same. And I know we have the regulation to start having more inclusion of racial equity curriculum in the next year or so. So I'm wondering why, if you can maybe give us some language around the social studies program staying flat in comparison to the others. Are we seeing more incorporation into LA, which is, I think, obviously a place that we could definitely incorporate that there, but just around the growth in those areas and why social studies doesn't really have anything?
Well, Ms. Nuccio, you have like 20 questions in this one question.
I'm
I mean,
good.
where do you want me to start? With the 359 or the whatever?
Well, let's start with the $250,000. Yeah, let's start with the $250,000.
Well, so which you said 359. What was the other?
It's 359, 641, and 646. So you've got professional and technical, textbooks, and curriculum material. Between those three things, we're going up $250,000.
So some of these, when we had the 0.1 from last year, some of these are putting back some things that were taken out before that we're trying to kind of recover and put back. The ones you have listed are in the object roll-up of the Board of Ed budget booklet. So I need to go through and, for instance, for number 359, let's go to that. And again, like some of this stuff, this could take a while to answer because these funds have a lot of other funds in them. But I can start with 359 and start kind of going through some of that, and then you can decide how much or how little of this you want.
Rather than getting into all the detail, because I understand, like you said, there's probably a lot of nuance in there. If I send it over to you as a question, you can kind of give us something back when you have a little bit more time to dig through it. But if I was just looking for something more kind of high level, and if the high level is some of it is stuff that we're putting back from last year, and some of it is XYZ, then that will suffice for tonight, and that it can be something that we take away.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is more or less the high level, but I have to take this fund by fund to kind of answer your question and do the due diligence. So I can do that verbally, like I could start talking about 359 has in it things like school intercoms and fire extinguishers and inspections of bleachers, inspections of fire pumps, inspections of gym equipment, annual inspections. I mean, these are things that I can rattle off, and there's a few pages of them, but I'm guessing that you will be wanting jump out a window if I go through every single one of these things right now. So, so I can, but essentially that's it. Pressure testing, repairs, and preventative maintenance on the AHU, RTU geothermal units, and Tectron boards and propane gas systems, and Fuss and O'Neill asbestos service monitoring, and water permit fees, and Otis elevator stuff, and life and safety repairs to emergency lights, batteries, bulbs. That's really what 359 is all about. And so a lot of it does fluctuate, because sometimes you'll have your service and service contracts and certain things, they come up at certain times. Maintenance things come up at certain times. You don't necessarily have to do the same maintenance on the same item every single year, but it kind of cycles. So this is part of, for instance, Peter Staba's domain, where he really is very good at making sure that we stay on top of the inspections, and that everything is done when it needs to be done, and not excessively so. And I think that's done better now under Pete than it has ever been done. We have far fewer issues, I think, than I've ever seen in the time that I've worked here since '06, say, because, those inspections and all those things are being done, and while something like that could be cut, then we're not doing the inspections, which just has a history of leading to exacerbated problems in this district that we now don't have the same issues with. And so 359, and then the next one was 641. Oh, crud, shoot. I just managed to close every window I had, which is not good. So.
Did you alt minimize?
I don't know what I did. That's what I hate how this works, because I just wave it the wrong way, and every window I had open closes, and then I don't even see them that I was referring to anymore. But I'm trying to get this back. Where are you? Okay, so all right. So the other one was 641.
Excellent.
Yep. And it's actually a little broader, I think, than that. It rolls in a couple of things. Where is all of this? Okay. Give me a moment. Okay. Yeah, this will take me a moment. I don't have any elevator music because,
Dun, dun, dun.
yeah, if you want to something. So here we go. Okay, so the 641 rolls up. 641. Okay, it rolls. It does. Yeah, right. So let me just give you an idea of that. Okay, so geodes, decodables, these are, geodes are mainly readers for kids in grades 1 and 2. In the past year, we implemented them for kindergarten. We need to expand them into the other grades for 1 and 2, for the 2021-2022 year. And that's part of an expansion of that program that we did in 1 grade that, needs to actually expand out now to the other grades as the kids move up through the system. It's getting rid of antiquated stuff that, has been shown to not be as effective. And so that obviously affects, how the kids perform. Special textbooks used by special education services is a part of that. SAVA system, it's a science grade 5 text. As we make our transition, there are digital formats that we're trying to make the transition to. That's an example of what would be in there. LA textbooks have to be expanded to the question you were asking about social studies curriculum. There's a program called Wit and Wisdom. And Wit and Wisdom is an expansion of ELA and social studies together that actually helps us do exactly what you're saying, which is make sure that that the program progression and the curriculum lead to a more expansive understanding the way the state of Connecticut is guiding everyone to move to. Just off the top of my head, it's about literature and composition texts that do become trashed and eventually need to be replaced. And so, They also have part of them in the reading programs that Barb Daly Burns has been very careful to make sure that we're expanding and using and having because of the new demands and because of some of the new requirements. We have to use what's called these close readers, and these close readers are a resource to help kids, in the kinds of literacy programming that that we need to be doing today. And this also includes things like paperback novels that get trashed because we all know what happened to our novels of Pride and Prejudice and Catcher in the Rye after they've been there for a while. They turn into all kinds of, versions of the story as they're edited by generous people making changes, and other things that can happen to things like that. So we have to keep that as kind of an expense. That's something that generally will have to be re-upped. We do have to replace them. They also include things like AP chemistry, earth science on an NGSS now requires a certain plan of study and things that need to be put in place so that our kids will do well in the grade 5, 8, I think 11 testing. So this allows us to address the NGSS standards through the SABIS Earth Science and Biology texts now that are more targeted towards NGSS, because you can't use the stuff that isn't, or the kids perform quite poorly. And these are aligned, and these are things that we have to invest in order to be able to do that. We're replacing 13-year-old textbooks in Spanish. I know that the general thought is that Spanish doesn't really change that much, but the 13-year-old textbooks, there are significant things that need to happen with Spanish that can't happen with the old texts as they become more worn in. They do get outdated, and a lot of world language these days, actually plays off of a lot of current things happening. So those texts generally have to have some kind of replacement cycle, and a 13-year replacement cycle is not crazy for something like that. Tech ed textbooks, obviously trying to make sure that we have the fiction and nonfiction books for the library. And I think that that's wrapped up in 641. 641 goes on for quite a while, but these are examples of things that are in 641. So maybe just, I can't see your faces anymore because literally every screen shut down on my computer. So I can't tell whether people are rolling their eyes or, opening windows to jump out of, but maybe I should stop right now on that one.
You're good. You're good.
And
I
then,
think you're giving us a good amount.
sorry, thank you. And then the other one was 646, right? So 646, well, I mean, that's kind of in some ways explanatory in that those are
These are like workbooks, right?
consumables. Yeah, we
They're
call
like
them workbooks or consumables. They're LA workbooks. And as I kind of talked about, some of these things now, they're greatly different than they were in the past. They even the understanding of dyslexia is much different. So these consumable textbooks we need them. They're part of what's called the Foundations and Journeys programs. Really crucial for phonics. The whole world turned upside down with phonics in the last 5 years. And so in education, the schools had to really retool how we taught that. And that's part of that. These consumables, we need them in order to teach the way that we're supposed to be teaching it, based on the research that came out on it. And so the program is Foundations. The workbooks are part of the consumables for that. Those consumables have teacher editions, things like that you have to buy. With the students edition comes the teacher. There's special education workbooks, LA workbooks, and mostly there are 4 things like Foundations, Journeys, Wit and Wisdom, math consumable workbooks, special education, ELA, social studies, that type of thing, and so on. So there's just a lot here. Spire, there's the special program we have to make sure that kids don't slip backwards into greater problems. It's called Spire. And that program itself has been massively successful in helping us identify students that are struggling and take care of their needs. It's a very prescribed program. And so it comes with these workbooks and readers that you have to use with Spire. And so we have actually this is a tangible thing that we've noticed, that we're able to really help students, some of them not become students of special education, because we had programs like Spire that have a much greater and evolved understanding of, how to address some of these needs than was previously understood. A lot of research in the last 5 or 10 years spawned these new programs, research that's nationwide research, and not just, I think, Tolland research. It was, these were nationwide changes in how people viewed how to teach this and do it more effectively. And if you're not doing this, you could be in a meeting where somebody would say, well, clearly you don't have the program supports that are needed here, so we insist that that a child receive X or Y services, or become a student of special education, because clearly you're not doing it. So this helps the district to make sure we are doing it. So kids, again, morally, ethically have the right services, but also it is a strong cost avoidance thing, because not having them means you're just going to pay in another way.
Right.
So that's, again, I could go on, but that's essentially the taste of that.
Okay. The
area.
last question that I have is, in the program budget, nursing is going up by $15,000. Is that COVID related?
Let's see.
It's in the program budget. It's back towards, I think it's Appendix A.
Can you give me the number?
Yep. Hold on. Here it is.
But I can hold on. Let me just try to do nursing. I can probably get that.
Um,
So I'm trying to just find within the sort of needle in a haystack of this.
Nursing. It's on. What do you want me to tell you? It's program nursing -144. It's in the all programs.
Okay. So let me just try to go over some of that. Here we go. Oops. Well, that's not good. Where did that go? Okay. In terms of the increase, I'd have to go figure out exactly, because it's broken down into a whole bunch of different lines here.
I'll put it on my list of questions.
Yeah, for that
That's
one,
all
I
have.
think it's probably better that, because for instance, there's, I'm trying to look for the biggest increase there, and it's just so many different lines for that one line.
Yeah.
Clinical laboratory fees and adjustments, and DPH, biannual stuff, and finger stick blood sugar testing, so I just need to take that one and give you maybe another one on it.
Okay, that works. I'll do that. It just stuck out because it's a 71% increase. So I'll do that though. I'll send it over to you. And that was my last question.
You know what? It may be salaries. We did finish the bargaining unit. That might have been part of it too. Last year or into this year, and it may have had some impacts. But anyway, I'll look at it and just.
Okay. All right. That's all that I have for questions. So I think that, Mike, that gets us to, where's my agenda?
Yeah, there's a public comment portion on this agenda. I know it was pointed out earlier today that the other two meetings didn't have that, but that's okay. So we, again, it's a public comment period. It's not necessarily a back and forth, but that's up to you, Madam Chair, to kind of, keep order.
Yeah, so this is going to be definitely, it's a comment it's not a back and forth, it's not questions, it's just comments. And then if you want to send in questions, you can send them to towncouncil@tolland.org. So when I call on you do we have Lisa here tonight? We do, right? She's taking minutes.
Lisa P, no, Mike Wilkinson's taking minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. So when we call on you, please state your name and address for the record. If you want to raise your hand on the participations, there's a button there you can use. If you're on a phone, it's *9, and just state your name and address for the record. Karen Moran.
Hi, thank you. Karen Moran, 50 Merlot Way. Tolland, obviously. Sorry, it's getting to be a long night. As we craft our town budget for next fiscal year, we are once again faced with uncertain funding from the state. Will the ECS roll down be paused or moved forward as originally planned? This could have a substantial impact on our town budget. Not knowing the amount of this funding leaves us in a difficult situation. I call on Tolland's legislative delegation to attend our budget hearing tomorrow night. Through their work in Hartford, they should be able to give our town some direction on this issue. At the very least, if they are not directly involved in these decisions, they have colleagues who are. Our legislative delegation has the responsibility to answer to the residents of Tolland regarding state budget matters, especially as it impacts our town. I call on them to bring some information, insight, and guidance on this issue. In 2017, we were in a similarly unknown situation. At the guidance of the then town manager, multiple iterations of the budget were drafted and revised. The process stretched out into mid-November, when the town voters finally had a realistic budget to consider at referendum. By that time, our schools had already opened their doors and were directed to run on an austerity budget. More than 1.5 million in cuts were made to our education budget that year based on projections. These projections ended up underestimating the amount of state ECS funding. However, the town council did not pass the increase in ECS funding to our schools, instead requiring our schools to absorb the cuts, and the increased ECS money was hoarded into non-education related accounts. The children of Tolland should not have to pay the price of further cuts, especially ones made based on projections. Our children are worth it, and our community is worth it. Our legislative delegation represents us in Hartford, and it's time for them to come back to Tolland and give us some answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Madhu?
Thank you. Madhu Renduchin Tolland, 93 Hurlbut Road. I just wanted to comment that the 3.19% increase in the board's adopted budget was vetted over the course of 10 weeks. It was passed by the board unanimously, and there's a lot of broad support within the community for this. There's a lot of recognition for the needs of the increase of this budget. So I just wanted the council to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Colleen?
Hey, Tam, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So, Colleen Udachuk, I'm sorry, 12 Blueberry Hill, Tolland, Connecticut. As you've probably seen, I've been following for the last week and a half. So really just want to take this opportunity just to thank all the heads of departments, the superintendent, Chief Lettel, everybody involved. You've all were pretty prepared. I was thoroughly impressed with Lisa's answer to all the questions last week. So I just wanted to recognize her too. I think, Tammy, you try to ask the great questions about LEAP, but I think we just really need to realize another important part is to keep our students in our town. So it's a delicate topic, and I think that's all I wanted to say. So I'll have probably more questions for you guys tomorrow night. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. The earbuds are not necessarily effective all the time. Dana Philbin, 11 Harvest Lane, Tolland, also the Tolland Board of Education member. First of all, I just want to thank everybody. I reiterate what Ms. Udachuk just said. I know that a lot of work goes in through all of our town departments, our school system, Dr. Willett and all of his team. Again, fire department, town, everybody that is involved in this lengthy budget process. And I appreciate the opportunity for open discussion and candor to try to do what's right for our community as a whole. What I would like to reiterate is something that Madhu had mentioned that, our unanimous Board of Ed budget that Dr. Willett presented originally to the town council. I am in support of that, not the proposed reduction that the town manager has proposed. My concern is when Dr. Willett uses words such as recovery, remediation, reform, and then we ask questions about assigning funds as COVID, because of the simple fact that although some of the situations with recovery, remediation, and reform might have incurred or have become a little bit more exposed due to COVID, it's not necessarily going to stop in 1 year. This could be years and years and years of recovery for our students, for our staff, and for our school system, and for our town. And the COVID money is not going to continue to come year over year over year. So I want us to be cognizant of that. I definitely think that a lot of our budget has projected opportunity to fund our schools, support our students and staff, and support our town to keep our schools growing and strengthen our schools. With cuts that we've made over the past several years, it has continued to take away opportunities within our school system. So I definitely feel strongly about the 10 plus weeks or more, I would say 10 plus weeks, that the BOE team, very diverse in thought team, worked together to propose to our town council. I would also, like to just reiterate, that our SPED programs are necessarily, as well as our LEAP programs, our general education programs are necessary, and it's our obligation as members of the Board of Education, and it's Dr. Willett as the leader of our school system and our superintendent, to ensure that we have the programs that are readily accessible and readily available to all of our students of all calibers, to ensure that we are taking care of the folks within the Tolland public school system and provide them with the necessary education, whatever that pathway may lead them. So, and I definitely think that it's important that we keep our folks within Tolland and not have folks looking elsewhere for education when we do continue to have a strong core foundation, but we need to continue to invest, and investing in you need to make sure that you're investing in your largest commodity, which is our school system. But again, I want to think, and I'm sorry, one last question, and I think this is more of a question, Ms. Nuccio, and maybe it's something that we can talk about in the future. But I guess my question is, what's the difference in the mill rate increase from what does the Tolland Board of Ed budget that the BOE presented versus what the town manager is presenting, impacting on the mill rate average home owners increase annually? My quick math shows about $40 to $60 annual household with the Board of Ed budget that was proposed. So I think that can kind of be bookmarked, and I know it's not a question and answer, but I would like to hear that response. And that's all I have. And I do thank everybody for their time and their due diligence. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Harold.
Michelle Harold, 194 Sugar Hill Road. I appreciate everybody's time that has been spent. It's been a lot of questions, a lot of time. I was going to ask a question, but when I was putting my children to bed, my husband said that you guys weren't taking questions, so I'll hold it. But I did want to encourage every one of the town council members, as you consider what you will allow for an increase. Like right now, the town manager has suggested a 3.5%. And it has been inferred in responses from him that if the board received their full 3.19% they were requesting, that it would put the mill rate increase at 4%, over 4% probably. I don't know what the number is, but I encourage you to use the tax calculator tool online on the town website to see the difference in your own assessment rates by putting in your current assessment rate in the tool to see what the differences between now and the 3.5%. And then additionally, if you do a 4% increase, for me, my house, the difference between a 3.5% increase and a 4% increase is $40.66 annually. And if that's worth the investment in our community to keep it as whole as possible as we recover from the pandemic and move forward. So I encourage you all to take the time to do that yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Sophia.
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry. Camera's not working and I'm a little bit delayed. Very extensive work here that's done, and I really appreciate the superintendent's presentation of the budget. My comment is regarding the ability to set Tolland Public Schools as a benchmark of success in Connecticut and in the United States, at public school systems, not, against school choice, where people, believe that in some neighborhoods they need school choice, or people need magnet schools in order to get the best. So far, for a 90% graduation rate, I can say that where I moved from, they were 73%, and that school district was beaming with pride, beaming. There was nothing that I can say to draw attention to that we can do better, that didn't, cause any kind of dissension, because they already felt that they were the best. So my recommendation would be is that if there's any kind of, spirit activity where, you bolster and empower the students to be the promotion behind their success, standing behind them and making them know that, you've achieved 90%, like sending them an Instagram post to let them know that they've done all the heavy lifting to make us have a successful school district. And, to support the teens and whatever it is that they're doing, to support the academic teams and what they're doing. They're the ones that are with the cell phones in their hands constantly. They're the ones that's retweeting stuff. They're the ones that are putting stuff on Instagram. If the lunch program is one, my kids haven't been able to, do that yet. But if the lunch is good, encourage them to talk about what Tolland's lunch program is like. So being able to support school spirit and to encourage the students to be proud of where they're from, be proud of their school district, be proud of what they accomplish and what they achieve, it'll spread. It'll spread, and people will see that, school spirit is something that can be bolstered within the students and empowered within the students, that they can embody that pride on their own. So I don't know if there's different ways to work with student council, the student councils in the high school, the junior high schools, or even elementary schools, to celebrate any kind of milestone that they achieve and put it above and beyond, and say, we are the best, and just keep telling them that we are the best. We're stronger together. That is easily done. Like I said, in a school district that had a 73%, that they were the bomb for 73%. Like, it could be so much worse than that. I'm happy and proud to see that I can trust that the school district will give my students, my children, what they need in order to move forward. But I want them to also have those points of pride that they can go off and say that, I graduated from Tolland and it feel good. And again, we can be the benchmark of what it looks like for a public school district within the state of Connecticut, as well as the nation. Thank you for all your hard work, and thank you for, presenting so well tonight. Thank you.
Sophia, you just need to state your address for the record.
Oh, I'm so sorry. 48 Crystal Lake Road.
That's no problem. Don't worry about it. Thank you. Liz Costa.
Hi, everyone. 54 Josiah Lane, Liz Costa. First of all, thank you for everything, and thanks to the Board of Ed for such a comprehensive review of all the line items. I would encourage Mrs. Plord and Mrs. Lundgren to support the education budget by speaking out tonight publicly and supporting the education budget that you all unanimously agreed upon. And over the last 5 years, our education budget has been on average about 0.7%, maybe even 0.5%, forgive me, because I don't have the number in front of me. If there were ever a time to invest in our children, invest in our teachers, our paras, our educators, it's now. And please don't take the American Care funds to utilize for the current year. Utilize it for the 4 years it was destined to use it for. Use it for special ed, use it for anything you need to use it for children that were impacted by the COVID situation. I would encourage you to pass the 3.19%, not the 2.7%.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, then, with that, Steve,
Yeah, sure thing. Steve Jones, I would make a motion to adjourn at 9:44 p.m.
second.
Lou Wall second.
All right, any comment? All those in favor? Brenda?
And a really quick thank you to all the town staff who are on tonight. You guys did a great job supporting us. Thank you.
Thank you. Cassandra?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Kurt?
Good, aye.
I'm an aye also. Thank you. It's unanimous. Everybody have a good night. See you tomorrow.
Take care. Be well.